leadership has become ambidextrous. So ask yourself the question. There was a time when you would remember people who would say, "Ye mera leadership style hai. I am Tismar Khan. Mera ye leadership style." Have you heard that? Many people have said. I believe that is dinosaur thinking. Your leadership style has to be so flexible that it works for X, Y, and Z as they feel motivated and relevant to that leadership style. People do things for their reasons, not yours. The genius of leadership is to get each one of them to believe that they are doing it for themselves, but actually they're doing it for you. And that's the power of aggregation. So some of you are interested, please Google me up and read that article, The Power of Aggregation. And ultimately, it's about building that sense of greater accountability. How does an individual person, irrespective of title, rank, hierarchy, tenure, gender, nationality, linguistic bias, continue to believe that I am equally committed and accountable for building the future of an organization and delivering its strategy? So this shift from the individual to the collective is actually one of the biggest demands of both leadership and of culture, because without that, you do not deliver your strategy. And that is why I love building or using this word, shared destiny. Strategy is inherent on building a culture of shared destiny. If you're not able to do that, you have a problem. There are hard ways of building shared destiny. There are softer routes of building shared destiny. But you need to build. And the question, therefore, to ask is, can you cross your heart and believe all your 500 employees, 1,000 employees, or 2,000 employees actually have a shared destiny? If I were to randomly pick 10 people, would I hear the same thing about what are you planning to do? I do not want people to give me full-blown answers. But can they explain to me in their own Hindi, Marathi, Telugu, whatever language, what is the company playing? For what's the business you are in? And many a time you don't get answers, right? And the challenge is people understand the way they seek to understand, not the way you thought they had understood. Important dimension of culture shaping. So I'm going to make a few comments around culture again, more in terms of you to see whether any of these connect with you. Many a time people say one unitary culture. I'm not too sure whether it's a smart leadership thinking or is it even strategically relevant. Should you always have one unitary culture? Or is it okay for subcultures to exist? Your multiple businesses, two businesses are very distinct from each other. Why would you want to force them down to one culture? Would an audit function necessarily have the same culture as a marketing department culture? Where is the elbow room for subcultures? Why do you want to say that the culture in India should be exactly what it is in Brazil? I'm not saying you should not have, but do you need to have? And the question, therefore, of leadership and therefore strategic response shaping is agility, flexibility. Are you able to keep your system and your culture that malleable, that it is suiting the purpose as is relevant for you in a market, in a business, in a geography? And this is not an easy job. And I will confess, I don't hear many boards even understanding issues like that. They understand the balance sheet well, they understand their financials well, but they don't understand this because board composition itself is not plural. It's the same left-brained logic. They all love their Excel sheets, they all love their numbers. But the challenge is the opportunity of creation, and you said it so beautifully, Nachiket. The possibilities of future is a right-brained exercise. And therefore, there is a problem even in the construct of leadership, in the construct of boards. So one is that. Second is, people think culture, it's kind of given, and now so shall it be. All of us have heard of Kathak. We've liked Kathak, it's a dance form. If I'd asked, if we were sitting in the 10th century and asked, is Kathak part of Indian culture? What would you have said? You would have said, no, it didn't exist. It came with the Turks. Today we say it's an Indian art form. It's an Indian dance form. Culture evolves. Culture is like a flowing river, right? And therefore, in your organizations, ask yourself, is your culture adequately morphing, evolving? Or is it like a still pond? Is it static? Is it dammed? And if the culture is dammed, unfortunately, your business is likely to get dammed. So think well, ask yourself these simple questions, or get someone to kind of help push you to answer and respond to some of those questions. So it's dynamic, it's not static. Your VUCA realities of business, volatility, uncertainty, complex, ambiguity, all of that is going to impact your business. Is your culture coming in the way, or is your culture enabling it? I find many of my client companies and from my own executive life, people say, "Ye hamara culture hai." What is the point of pickling your culture if it is not actually adding strategic value? And if you want to change your culture, it doesn't take 5 years. And this is one of the things with many of my clients I debate. If you're thinking you're going to take 5 years to change a culture, you will never change your culture. You will be a good captain, you'll go down with your ship. But if you want to change your culture to be relevant to the context in which you operate, and you need to then move your orbits of culture, where is the pivot? Where would you reposition? Which orbit would you go? And how to do that is about all the different levers of deployment. So let me give you a small example. Imagine the river Ganga flowing. I come from Bihar, right? So it used to cut the one unified state of Bihar into two parts, right? North and south. And here's a river which is going smooth. But imagine there are tributaries and there are distributaries. Look at the tributaries of your culture shaping, your organization design. If you have 15 levels in your organization, stop dreaming about being an agile or an innovative company. You will not be. Look at your performance systems. What do you measure? Lead measures, lag measures. If you're only going to be bean counting, you will never have a culture which is going to be actually leading your future. What is your reward recognition philosophy? What do you reward? What do you reprimand? Small things. What do you celebrate? You never celebrate. I was talking to a client and he said, "We want to be a very innovative company." I said, "In the last 5 years, tell me in your awards night, how many failures did you celebrate?" None. You'll never be an innovative company. All of these are ways in which the tributaries contribute to culture influencing. Distributaries, am I an entrepreneurial culture? Am I a risk-taking culture? Am I a culture which fixes accountability? Am I a mediocre culture? Am I a high-performing culture? These are outcomes. And outcomes happen depending on your inputs. But we don't want to talk about inputs because that's cast in stone. मेरे बाप दादा ने भी ऐसे ही किया था. Boss, that worked in that era. It made sense. It doesn't make sense today. So it's a lot of honest, cross your heart questions and responses that help you move to that. I've talked about subcultures. And of course, finally, the power of trust and conversations. Conversation is not communicating to your people. It's communicating with your people. Dyad, triad. Jimmy was talking about, whether it's 500 people he wants to meet or 50 people. There's no one right or wrong answer, but it has an impact on the culture. Are you the one who's speaking, or are people speaking? Is it okay for you to say, "I don't know"? Vulnerability of leadership. How vulnerable are you willing to be? Or do you want to be Rana Sangha? See, it is all very, very soft, simple questions, but it is very difficult to change because everyone believes this has worked for me, and it is very difficult not to be an Icarus. And therefore, when you're trying to understand the interplay of leadership and culture with your strategy, these are all the things that become very important. Because your culture is a product of your past, but the invitation that I would have for you is, are you shaping your culture for tomorrow? You can buy companies. Most M&As fail, not because the maths was not right, because culture was something they never understood right. And it can actually kill organizations. So that's something which is very important. So whatever your scale and size of your company today, my request is please look at these dimensions. The unsaid, fissures which are there in your organization, which is impacting the sense of shared destiny. Because each one is receiving everyone else's action from their lens of what is culture. And therefore, strategy need not be a prisoner of your current culture. If your strategy is different, your culture will need to change. Repudiation must then be a conscious strategic leadership choice. If your play is shifting, you're moving your customer segment, you're moving your product segment, your consumer mix has changed, your consumer preferences have changed. You're becoming from a Maharashtra organization to a global company. You will have to appear to have changed your culture, irrespective of how well it worked for you so far. And therefore, the strategy culture play is a very, very conscious choice. What are you going to change of your culture? And therefore, the linked question, what is culture? Culture is how people behave. If you still celebrate what you celebrated all this time, your culture will not change. If your talent mix remains what it was all these years, your culture will not change. And that is why it is prudent to think which cards will you pick and which cards will you drop. Yes, please.
In terms of what was the thought behind the input, the actual input, and then
I'll share one or two instances, so there's a company, an agrochemical company, which was of a certain scale size, largely an India play company. It suddenly makes an LBO of huge proportion, many times ahead of it, and a completely global business. How do you think this company will pivot its culture when your entire business, your workforce, etc., has started becoming global? 80% of that company's business is overseas, right? 80% of its employee base is now global. One small thing, they shifted their headquarters of their top management team to a global location. I think 60% or 70% of their top leadership is global. The cultural norms, therefore, which was historically very Indian in its origin, etc., has to by design appear global. Small example. Other issue, you are of a certain small scale and size, but you have now added 3 different lines of business, right? Let me give you an example. One of my past employers, they historically were in one particular segment. They decided to get very aggressive and go into what fundamentally were service lines of business. One of the big things of changing their value statement and their entire policy redesign was to make sure that it gets geared for service sectors, not from the command and control realities of a more classical organization or classical business. So there are many such reasons, but the fact is it is very counterintuitive. And that's why I'm raising this, because people will say this is the way we've always done. And my response always is, guys, think of a better alibi or a reason. This is not good enough, that we have always done. And the smart leaders, the smart strategy is to be able to move very quick. And therefore, building agility in your culture is a very important dimension, right? So this is how, depending on what your strategy is, what the play in your industry is, where are the dark clouds emerging? They are, I firmly believe, whether it is careers or business opportunities, the next big wave is going to come from the end of the wide-angled prism, from the fringes, not at the end of the tunnel. But is your thinking wide-angled enough? We believe that my competition is ABC. No, sir, your competition is not going to be ABC. It is going to be 1, 2, 3. And a lot of this will have to be, therefore, part of your strategy thing, because talent, culture, leadership behavior, choice of talent, everything will change. And I'll talk about talent in just a while. Does that help somewhere? Yeah, thank you. So it's all about aligning. This is the job of leadership, alignment. Ourselves, our teams, our efforts. I don't want to delve into that. So it is bringing that point about connecting with innovation and transformation. Unless you innovate, I believe that if you have big scale, gigantic scale, you can be in a commoditized business. Otherwise, please build something which is innovative. Not only a ticket to play, but a ticket to win. That is the job of leaders. What is your right to win? And unless you discover your right to win, and that can only happen when you think of innovation. And innovation may not always happen internally. It's that wide angle thinking. What can you steal as something from someone else's doing and behaving and apply it in your context? There's a difference between invention and innovation. I'm not talking about invention. We are talking about innovation. I think, Nachiket, when he said, I stole this frog's, whatever color scheme, etc. Innovation. Why did you and I not think? Why did he think? We've got to be looking around all the time, picking ideas and seeing how we can redefine our problems to redefine our solutions, and integrative thinking, pulling it all together. Ideas can come from anyone. And that's really what the DLC is trying to do. Get a lot of different ideas and learnings and see, hey, you know what, in that melting pot, can I get two things which I can go away with? I will not get into details, but this is a very important thing, why strategy derails and why culture and leadership are accountable. This is not my slide. This is from one of my favorite authors called Patrick Lencioni, so I must disclose. This is not my slide, but I love this, so I'm sharing it with you. Most times, companies do not deliver the kind of business outcome that they are supposed to deliver because, and whether you're the management team or it's hierarchical pyramid, there is absence of trust. Cross your hearts. You will relate with some of these experiences yourself from your past lives or maybe your current realities. When there is absence of trust, what happens? People are scared of conflict. They don't want to debate because if I say this, I'll be misunderstood. So they keep quiet. When there is absence of trust and there is fear of conflict, what happens? They'll say whatever the boss has said is fine. But there is not enough commitment. It's not authentic co-ownership. You told me. Many a time they will go out and say, well, that's what the boss said, but I don't agree with it. But in the room when he asked, everyone's on board? They said, yes. But that's not commitment. That's compliance. So lack of commitment. When there is lack of commitment, there is avoidance of accountability. I had never said yes to that. You see, this is a cultural reality of how you're getting your culture to be shaped. And when there is avoidance of accountability, there is inattention to results because you're always happy to give an alibi. So it's a very simple construct. But culture, this is how it all gets impacted. And imagine if there was no absence of trust, if people were willing to debate, disagree. Out of that debate, discussion, whatever decisions came would lead to stronger commitment. With stronger commitment, everyone is rowing in the same direction. And when everyone is rowing in the same direction, you actually achieve your strategic outcome. Leadership, culture, strategy. Make sense? Dysfunctional leadership teams easily wreck the best strategic aspirations. Individuals may be great, but collectively they fail. Imagine the cost of having such a team at the top. Unimaginable. Intervene before it is too late. So it doesn't matter what is the scale and size of your operation. You've got 5 leaders at the top. How good are they? Leadership is a collective sport. It is not a solo sport. Leadership is about ambidextrous behavior. It is not either or anymore. It is on the one hand and on the other hand. It is and. It's the power of the and. Leadership is a difficult business. Unfortunately, in India particularly, everyone wants to correlate leadership with titles. But that's not true. Unfortunately, money is also linked because you have bad classical HR thinking that a higher title is what gets you better money. Why should it be? Right? So a lot of this is really about you don't know what's working, what's not working. Psychographic makeups of people are so different. What motivates one does not motivate the other. Are you willing to flex enough? How do you and how quickly are you able to allow people to deal with their differences? Are people comfortable having conversations and open debates and discussions, or is it more an order-taking ecosystem? Issue of culture, issue of role modeling of the leader. How the leader presents himself or herself is how the team start mimicking behavior. When the team challenges you. Who do you hire? Do you hire people better than you, smarter than you, brighter than you? I am not a believer of diversity and inclusion, by the way. And I've written extensively on it because unfortunately it has been seen only through the lens of gender. My thesis is, please be in the business of building cultures of pluralism, where there's diversity of thinking. My daughter may be a different gender, but her upbringing is as skewed as mine. So we'll think the same way. So, a lot of this so-called, and the reason I asked Nachiket also about that fashion is even in the space of organization thinking, I hate the fashion, copy. When I remember 15, 16 years ago, in my company at that time, when I was a CHRO, I made maternity leave for 6 months. The law was 3 months. Today, law is 6 months. Why did it take 15 months, 15 years for people to get to this point, even for the government to do? Paternity leave, when I introduced, no one was talking about paternity leave. No MNC was talking about that. When in one of my larger employers, we moved self-approval to any place in India by the lowest employee. It was a shocker. No company in the world, at least operating out of India, no MNC has done that. But the issue is if you want to create a culture of trust and ownership, you've got to let go. You cannot create a culture of empowerment and agility and swift decision-making and ownership and say, everything I will decide. So many a time we are not conscious, but every small thing impacts agility, innovation, ownership, response. And everyone must retire from the same company and become a consultant to the same company. Builds a certain culture. Different dimensions, right? I'm just giving you a flavor, but this is what as entrepreneurs, as leaders of your business, you must be very conscious of, because this lifelong employment, tenure-based thing, I personally think is a trap. Let people grow, let people go on, let there be great brand ambassadors of your company. But do you have the relevant mix of talent as relevant today?